Imagine building your entire house of faith on a foundation of mistranslated sand. This is the debate. Imagine realizing that a missing chapter of humanity's origin story was kept hidden in a family's attic for 2 millennia.
It's a staggering thought.
It really is. Today, we are opening up a text that was systematically buried, a text that, it fundamentally shatters the traditional understanding of the Western world's most foundational narrative.
Right, and it's not just a missing chapter either. We are talking about a complete parallel architecture of Genesis. You think you know the origin story.
The 7 days, the garden.
Exactly, the flood, the patriarchs. But what we're looking at today is a text claiming to have been dictated on Mount Sinai by the angel of the presence.
Dictated directly to Moses.
Directly to Moses, all while the Israelite camp waited below in this state of terrified silence.
Yeah, we are talking about the Book of Jubilees. It's often referred to as the Little Genesis. This is a text that was entirely excised from the Western Bible.
Completely wiped out.
Wiped from the pews, scrubbed from the seminaries, and just relegated to the shadows of history, yet it was preserved whole, practically untouched, in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon. And then, in the mid-20th century, it was dramatically unearthed among the oldest Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran.
Which is just an incredible historical moment.
Absolutely. Now, I represent the perspective that when you look at this text, you are looking at the indispensable, missing architectural blueprint of history. I believe it provides the crucial hidden context without which the canonical Genesis is just an incomplete, shadow-filled sketch.
A sketch? Wow.
Yes, a sketch. Because we are talking about the revelation of a perfect 364-day heavenly calendar. We get exact mathematical dates for every patriarch, and perhaps most terrifyingly, a named, highly motivated adversary operating behind the scenes. Without Jubilees, we are only reading half the story.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I look at the Book of Jubilees, and I do not see a missing history that was somehow suppressed.
Okay. What do you see then?
I see an ancient, deeply elaborate coping mechanism. It is undeniably brilliant, yes, but it's ultimately a human interpretive expansion. I view this text as something created by a community that was just desperate.
Desperate for what?
Desperate to impose rigid, predictable order on the terrifying, chaotic silence of the canonical text. The canonical Genesis is powerful precisely because of its blank spaces. It leaves room for mystery, for the unknown, for an untamed divine.
But that mystery is exactly what?
Jubilees tries to pave over all of those sacred blank spaces with mathematical concrete.
But let's actually look at the foundation of that concrete, because it literally restructures time itself. The first major revelation in Jubilees is this 364-day heavenly calendar.
Right, the calendar.
And the mathematics here are not just elegant. They are profoundly theological. If you have a 364-day solar year, it divides perfectly into 52 weeks, exactly 52.
No remainders.
0 remainders. There are no stray days hanging off the end of the year. There are no sliding dates. That means every holy day, every single feast, lands on the exact same day of the week every single year for eternity.
Which sounds incredibly convenient.
It means Passover never drifts. The Day of Atonement never slides.
If you are listening to this, you might be wondering why a 10-day difference between a solar calendar and a lunar calendar is worth fighting a cosmic theological war over. But you have to look at what the writers of Jubilees were fighting against.
They were at war with the moon.
They were, quite literally, at war with the moon.
They absolutely were. Because the lunar calendar, which the broader culture and much of the ancient world used, is only about 354 days long.
Right.
That means every single year, your calendar is short. Your holy days drift backward by almost 2 weeks against the actual physical seasons.
Yeah, within a decade, the harvest feast completely slips out of the harvest season. You'd be celebrating a spring festival in the dead of winter.
Exactly. And to the writers of Jubilees, that drift isn't just an administrative annoyance. It is a slow, creeping corruption of cosmic architecture.
Cosmic corruption.
Yes, they believed time wasn't something humans invented just to track seasons. They believed time was inscribed on heavenly tablets before creation even began. On day one, before a single human being existed to observe it, the angels of the presence were already keeping the Sabbath in heaven. So the 364-day calendar isn't just about knowing when to show up for festival. It is the ultimate revelation of a God of total, unyielding order who keeps exact appointments. It is a divine clockwork.
It is a divine clockwork, I will grant you that, but isn't it also a celestial cage? You really have to ask yourself what it means to treat history as a pre-written, inflexible celestial record.
A cage.
Yes, a cage. If every week, every year, every single historical epoch is strictly inscribed on heavenly tablets before a human being even takes their first breath, where is the room for human agency?
Well, they would argue
The canonical Genesis gives us a God who walks in the cool of the garden, a God who sits down and negotiates with Abraham over the fate of Sodom, a God who reacts to human corruption with a breaking heart. It is a living, breathing, dynamic relationship.
it is dynamic, sure.
But Jubilees replaces that visceral, dynamic relationship with an immovable, eternal spreadsheet. Doesn't that strip away the sheer vitality of the human experience? It turns time into a rigid, predetermined trap.
That is an interesting point, though I would frame it entirely differently. I don't see it as a cage at all. I see it as an anchor.
An anchor.
We have to think about the historical reality of the people holding this text. They were a community facing exile, intense persecution, and a world that felt completely, terrifyingly out of control.
Sure, they were under immense pressure.
When your actual world is collapsing around you, a God who is improvising, a God who changes his mind is terrifying. The heavenly tablets offer the ultimate psychological and theological assurance.
That the suffering has a strict expiration date.
Yes. Your suffering is not God losing the thread of the story. Your dark chapter is already written, it is mathematically accounted for, and it ends with restoration. That is not a cage. That is the only way a marginalized community survives the silence of heaven.
But they aren't just surviving the silence, they are aggressively filling it in. We have established that they wanted to control time. But they didn't stop there. They also wanted to control the physical spaces and the family trees.
The genealogies.
Right. They flesh out the skeleton of Genesis in ways that fundamentally alter the DNA of the original story. Take those genealogies, for instance.
You mean the famous silence around the women in Genesis?
Exactly. Genesis gives us Cain, Seth, Enosh, and the text just keeps rapidly moving forward. Anyone reading it, from an ancient rabbi to a modern Sunday school student, asks the exact same question.
Where did Cain's wife come from?
Who on earth did Seth marry? Genesis leaves it completely dark. It offers no explanation. But Jubilees stops the narrative, shines a spotlight into the darkness, and gives them names: Awan, Azorah.
It explicitly names the daughters of Adam and Eve.
And it doesn't stop with simply naming people. It puts every single event on a strict, unyielding timeline built on 49-year cycles, the Jubilees.
Yes, the mathematics of the Jubilee. Let me break down why that matters. A Jubilee isn't just a random large number. It is 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7.
49 years.
49 years to a single Jubilee. And in the ancient Israelite tradition, that 50th year is the year of ultimate release. Debts are forgiven, slaves are freed, land is returned to its original owners.
The year of Jubilee.
Right. Jubilees takes that concept and calculates exactly when Adam left the garden, exactly when Noah was born, when Abraham was called, all based on these 49-year cycles. It's physically pinning human history to a calendar of redemption.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Giving Cain's wife a name like Awan doesn't actually solve the deep existential mystery of the text. It just domesticates it.
Domesticates it? How?
Think of it this way. This is like an ancient architect finding a wild, ancient, terrifyingly beautiful forest
and deciding to retrofit it into a manicured, predictable temple courtyard. Genesis is primal. It is mythic.
But it's also...
It operates on the logic of dreams and deep, unexplainable spiritual truths. When you suddenly introduce a calendar and start dating things down to the specific week of a 49-year cycle, you are turning a profound, mythic origin story into a dry, municipal chronicle.
I am not convinced by that line of reasoning, because calling it a municipal chronicle completely misses the absolute majesty of what Jubilees is building. It is not reducing the text, it is elevating it.
Elevating it to what?
Let's look at Eden. Genesis presents Eden simply as a garden. It's a beautiful place with fruit trees and rivers, but Jubilees elevates it exponentially. It reveals Eden not merely as a lush garden, but as the very first Holy of Holies.
The temple.
It is the most sacred ground God ever created on earth, and Adam isn't just placed there as a primitive gardener, he is placed there as the first high priest.
Serving in an earthly sanctuary?
Yes, the text explicitly states that Adam offers sweet incense at the gate of Eden as he leaves. Think about how fundamentally that reframes the fall of man.
It changes the entire stakes.
It wasn't just a primal family losing a nice piece of real estate because they ate a fruit. It was humanity being exiled from the sanctuary. The first temple was lost. That isn't domesticating a myth. That is elevating the primal story into the highest form of sacred architecture.
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
It tells the ancient reader that worship didn't just start randomly at Mount Sinai with a list of rules. Worship, priesthood, the sanctuary, these are older than humanity itself.
It is beautiful imagery, I will absolutely grant you that. Adam as the first priest offering incense at the gates of Eden is poetic. But we have to call it what it is.
Which is?
Retroactive continuity. It is projecting the temple system of Jerusalem backward onto the dawn of time to justify their own religious structures. They needed their current practices to have eternal, cosmic validity.
They were revealing the origins of those practices.
No, they quite literally wrote them into the origin of the world. And if they are doing that with Eden, they are doing it with the patriarchs. They have Abraham celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles.
Which validates the eternal nature of the law.
But it's an impossible anachronism. For the listener who might not know, the Feast of Tabernacles is a festival explicitly designed to commemorate the Israelites wandering in the wilderness in tents after escaping Egypt.
Right.
Jubilees has Abraham celebrating it generations before the Exodus even happened. It's a blatant anachronism designed purely to legitimize their calendar and their practices. They are making Abraham a good law-abiding Jew before Judaism theoretically existed.
It is not just about legitimizing a calendar or a religious festival. It is about explaining the terrifying mechanics of reality. And this brings us to what I consider the most chilling, consequential revelation in the entire text. We have to talk about the adversary.
Ah, Mastema.
Mastema, the prince of spirits. In the canonical Genesis, the dark forces that test humanity are incredibly vague. You have a serpent here, a shadow there. Evil doesn't really have a clear, unified face.
It's mostly just human failing.
Right. But Jubilees pulls back the curtain and exposes the entity operating behind the scenes of human tragedy, Mastema. The name literally translates to hostility or accusation.
And he is very active in this text.
The text details exactly how he operates with stunning precision. After the flood, when the evil spirits, the demonic offspring of the fallen angels, are corrupting the earth, Noah begs God to bind them all, to lock them away so humanity can heal.
And God commands his angels to do exactly that.
But Mastema steps before the throne of God and makes a formal legal petition. He asks God to leave exactly 1/10 of these evil spirits under his command on earth. And his argument is terrifying in its cold, bureaucratic logic.
It's very transactional. He says, if none remain, I cannot exercise the authority of my will against the sons of men. He argues that he needs them to test humanity, to sift the righteous from the wicked. And shockingly, God grants it.
1/10.
1/10 of the demonic forces are legally permitted to remain on earth to try to tempt and to push against the faithful. And see, that is exactly where the theological architecture crumbles for me. That's a compelling argument. But have you considered the catastrophic theological cost of introducing this figure?
What cost? It answers the problem of evil.
Let's look at where Jubilees places Mastema to do his work. The binding of Isaac, Genesis chapter 22. It is arguably the most agonizing, profound, and mysterious chapter in the entire Bible.
It is absolutely agonizing.
Genesis says, quite simply and terribly, God tested Abraham. There is no reason given, just a raw, terrifying encounter between the divine and the human. God demands the unthinkable, the sacrifice of a son.
Yes.
But Jubilees completely rewrites this profound scene. It says Mastema went to God and challenged him, saying, Abraham loves Isaac more than God. It turns the binding of Isaac into a petty cosmic wager, exactly like the prologue of the Book of Job.
And doesn't that make infinitely more sense? Let me give you an analogy. It operates almost like a spiritual vaccine. You introduce a controlled amount of the disease, in this case, Mastema's testing, to build the immune system, the ultimate faith of the host.
No, I fundamentally disagree, because it functions purely as a theological scapegoat. It lets God entirely off the hook for the trauma of the test.
Off the hook?
Yes. By inserting Mastema into the story, Jubilee shields God from the raw, incomprehensible darkness of his own command. It sanitizes the divine. It essentially says to the reader, oh, don't worry, God didn't actually want to do this to Abraham. The adversary provoked him into it.
That's not sanitizing God.
It robs the original text of its staggering raw power. We lose the mysterious God who tests us in the terrifying silence of our lives, and instead we get a predictable, bureaucratic cosmic court where angels and demons are just trading bets.
Look, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on what Mastema actually represents. It doesn't sanitize God. It illuminates the reality of the cosmic war we are living in.
I just don't see how.
Without Mastema, the testing of Abraham feels utterly random. It almost feels sadistic. It's just God reaching down to traumatize his most faithful friend for no apparent reason. But with Mastema, we see that the trials of the faithful are not arbitrary cruelty.
They are part of the wager.
They are the proving ground in a massive, invisible struggle that is far older than humanity itself. And crucially, God is still sovereign. Mastema only gets 1/10 of the spirits. God holds the leash.
He does hold the leash, yes.
And it is God who ultimately stays Abraham's hand on the mountain, effectively shaming Mastema and proving Abraham's righteousness to the heavenly court.
But look at what they do with the Exodus. They can't just leave it at Abraham. They pull Mastema into the Passover itself.
Because they are revealing the true scope of the Passover. The canonical text frames the Exodus largely as Moses versus Pharaoh. It's a prophet and a stubborn earthly king. But Jubilees pulls the camera way back.
It makes it a supernatural blockbuster.
It reveals that on the night of the Passover, while the Egyptians sleep and the Hebrew families are huddled, terrified behind doors marked with lamb's blood, there is a literal, invisible war raging in the sky above them.
Between the angels.
It is the angels of the presence battling against Mastema and his powers of darkness. It is heaven's forces physically holding the line over a sleeping people. It elevates the story from a mere political deliverance from slavery into a literal cosmic salvation.
It turns history into a fantasy epic. And again, we come back to the core issue. It reflects a traumatized community's desperate need to externalize their suffering. It is a psychological defense mechanism.
You really think it's just a coping mechanism?
Yes. They are saying it's not that God is punishing us directly. It's that Mastema's forces are attacking us, and the angels of the presence are fighting them off on our behalf. It is a profound, incredibly elaborate psychological coping mechanism.
I think that's incredibly reductive.
They are building a massive theological fortress to defend against the unexplained, random suffering in the world. They need every tragedy explained, every historical gap filled, every single year mathematically accounted for. It is beautiful, yes, but it is desperate human architecture.
But it is preserved evidence of an ancient truth. You cannot simply dismiss this as a mere psychological coping mechanism. When we look at the physical evidence, the ground itself testifies to the weight and authority of this book.
You mean Qumran?
Yes. In 1947, when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered at Qumran, the archaeologists didn't just find one fragile, obscure fringe copy of Jubilees. They found over a dozen separate Hebrew manuscripts of this text.
That is objectively true. It exists in multiple copies among the oldest biblical manuscripts humanity has ever found.
Exactly. And anyone who studies ancient manuscripts knows that when a community wears out a scroll and meticulously copies it over and over again, it means that text is central to their reality. Jubilees was cherished alongside the books of Moses.
It wasn't a fringe document.
This isn't some Middle Ages forgery or fringe cult document. It is a genuine, unredacted ancient tradition from centuries before the time of Christ. And while the Western world let it slip into absolute obscurity, wiping it from our collective memory, it never actually died.
The Ethiopian canon.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved it whole. They kept this entire, massive second telling of Genesis on their altar, copied faithfully by hand across centuries of war, famine, and geopolitical collapse. Translated from Hebrew into Ge'ez, the ancient holy language of Ethiopia.
There is absolutely no denying the miracle of its preservation, the immense dedication of the Ethiopian scribes, the survival of the jars in the Qumran caves. It definitively proves this text was foundational, authoritative, and deeply sacred to incredibly faithful people.
So we have to grapple with it.
But the central tension of our discussion remains. We are looking at a collision of two fundamentally different ways of experiencing the divine. Is God the grand architect of a rigid, 364-day preordained celestial machine, battling a named adversary in the sky while human history plays out on a fixed schedule?
Or
Is God the mysterious, silent presence of the canonical Genesis, moving in the unpredictable, untamed spaces of human freedom, where the blank spaces are meant to be lived in, not paved over?
And that is the ultimate collision. When we hold the Book of Jubilees, are we looking at humanity's most beautiful, desperate attempt to build a theological fortress against the silent, unexplained suffering of the canonical world?
Right.
Or are we holding the genuine, unredacted, divine reality of a God of absolute order, a God who keeps exact mathematical appointments, who explicitly names the unseen adversary so we can understand our trials, and who sovereignly holds the leash of every demonic force we face?
Engaging with these marginalized texts is so vital precisely because it forces every single one of us to confront the silences in our own beliefs. It forces us to ask ourselves what we do with the blank spaces in our sacred texts and ultimately in our own lives.
How we handle the unknown.
Exactly. When we face the unknown, do we leave those spaces dark, trusting the profound mystery of the divine, or do we demand the names, the exact dates, and the rigid architecture of certainty?
And it leaves us with one final unsettling question. If a book this massive, this profoundly influential, could be completely erased from the Western consciousness for 2,000 years, what else might be hidden in the margins of the history we thought we knew? Imagine building your entire house of faith on a foundation of mistranslated sand. Imagine what happens to that house when the attic doors finally opened.